Fantastic to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we'll kick off with the fact that, of course, you've travelled around the world working, some incredible positions from the research I did. What brings you back to towns like Sheffield and Scunthorpe? Obviously, Rob mentioned you are originally from Sheffield.
Yeah, I'm now quite fancy Professor Sir and all that. I didn't start like that, right? Both my parents left school when they were 12. Right? My dad was a pork butcher. His wife was a shop assistant. Right? And I was the freak that got from there to Oxford. And then I was up against all these southern public school boys, and it got a whole lot easier. Right? And so I ended up being promoted and became a professor there and blah, blah. So that's me. Right? Why Scunthorpe? Why? I've done this little book called Left Behind, which is about how places like Scunthorpe, and for that matter, my hometown of Sheffield, can renew themselves, reinvent themselves, forge a future where they can restore their pride in place and have a reason why their kids will stay in Scunthorpe, will stay in Sheffield, because they're a great place to have a future, right? Shame on me, I was a kid who left Sheffield, and I feel that as a burden for the rest of my days, right? Of course, in my day, most kids who, like me, went to Oxford, then went back. The guy who was head boy when I was not a head boy, very much not a head boy, the guy who was head boy became chief executive of British Steel when there was such a place, right? Before it was taken over by some foul private equity firm, you know. So that was the tradition in Sheffield. I was the odd one not going back. And I feel that debt to the place that brought me up, and always will. So that's why I'm trying, belatedly, to do things like write this little book, Left Behind, which is about how places like Scunthorpe and Sheffield really can renew, because so many other places around the world have done so. And I think by showing you these models of how other places very similar to Scunthorpe have reinvented themselves, have forged a new future. And I understand you're all, the temptation is to be trapped in nostalgia for the past and think we were a steel town, we were a fine steel town, and we still are, and we always will be. You won't be. Right? You won't be. You've been given a reprieve, so you're not going to in there panic. Don't say, thank you for that reprieve. Say, that's what you've done for us. Now let us tell you what we want, what we need from you. Right? Here's the menu of what we need. And it's going to be very specific. We'll come to what it is. I've already talked with enough people in Scunthorpe to know this huge amount of energy, enthusiasm, and experience that is massively valuable. Huh? We just went round this building. It's fabulous, fabulous facilities. Fabulous facilities. Right? It's the best that I've seen. It's better than anything in Oxford. Right? It's really world-class facilities. But it looked, when I went round, as if it had been hit by a neutron bomb, because it was completely empty. Huh? They said, oh, well, it's 5 o'clock on Friday. At 4 o'clock, everybody goes home. Well, can you do better than that? I'll tell you what you'd do if you were in China. You'd run these fabulous facilities, you'd run them 24 hours, 7. Right? You can't do that. But suppose you just said, what would it take to double our intake next year? Think big, right? And they say, what constraints will be hit? How would we break them? Right? You've got magnificent facilities. They cost a fortune. You don't need more facilities. You need more kids going through. Local kids. Right? So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think it kicks us off perfectly, because my next question would be around, I think somebody once famously said, education, education, education. How do we make sure that the children of this town are not left behind? And, you know, institutions like this, how do we reach out to the schools and just make sure, particularly, you know, the poorest in our community are not left behind? It often does feel in towns like this that we do live a little bit of a postcode lottery, and even within the town itself. So how do we make sure we avoid those kind of challenges?
Sure. I mean, Sheffield's got a famous bus route where at one end and the other, the difference is 16 years in life expectancy. Right? Now, that's shameful, but the real shameful thing is the difference between Sheffield and Scunthorpe on the one hand and London and the southeast on the other. That's the big shame. Right? Money has been poured into infrastructure in London for the last 40 years. Who's paid for it? You have, right? Right? And every time there's an opportunity for more to be poured in, this is because the Treasury, which is the real place that runs the country, the Treasury has this weird belief that public investment should follow where private investment goes. That is the only Ministry of Finance in the world that's crazy enough to think that. Right? Obviously, public investment should guide private investment to where it should be going, but isn't, unless it's led by public investment. We're the only place that doesn't do that. This is the problem of the British Treasury. Right? It's weird, and it needs really dismantling. If you've got an MP who can help, right? But education, 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 start with kids who are very young. Start with preschool, actually. A lot of education for the really challenged starts at preschool. Right? I know because two of my own kids I adopted from damaged early years in Sheffield. I don't want to go into that, but I've got lived experience here, and it's perfectly possible to do very good preschool. Learn from anywhere else in Europe. Very good preschool, France. France, damn it, right? We've got a thing called the British Business Bank, which eventually should help you. It's just invested 600 million in a company called EDF. Does anybody know what EDF stands for? Électricité de France, yeah, thank you, yeah. It's a French company. It's a French public state-run company. Why are we investing in a French state-run company rather than in a British state-run company delivering electricity? I'll tell you why, because there isn't one. Why isn't there one? Because the Treasury wouldn't dream of setting it up. Okay, so education, education, education. Start with preschool. Learn from places like France. Preschool, very, very good. École maternelle, children's school, mothering school. Starts at age 2.5, goes 2.5 to 6. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Right? So there's a model used elsewhere. Then if you get beyond preschool, the really, really killing reduction in life chances occurs between primary school and university. Sorry, primary school and secondary school. There's a lot of research on this, some of it in my little book Left Behind, which incidentally is in paperback, just come out. Don't buy the hardback. But the example of life chances. Life chances measures the chances, if you start from the poorer part of society, what's your chances of getting into the richer part? Not super rich, just, start in the bottom 40% chance of getting into the top 40%. In Britain, your life chances are massively different in Scunthorpe from if you were in London. Massively. If you're working class Scunthorpe, sorry, you're just in the wrong couple of boxes, right? So that's the tragedy in Britain. We've got this massive social inequality, which is partly where you do live and partly what class you are. Right? Worst in Europe, right? Shameful. Right? So, where's the big catastrophe moving from primary to secondary? Kids who are doing very well at primary then go into secondary and deny their early promise. So that's the next stage where we really need to do a lot of work fixing. I don't know Scunthorpe well enough to know if that's your problem or if there's anything you can do about it. But I bet there are some school teachers or somebody involved in schooling in this room. We've already talked with plenty of people who were in that sort of line of work. And so you think, is this our problem? And if it is, what can we do about it? I can't save you, but I can just give you some nudges to say, if you get together as a little group and study that problem, you can fix the problem yourselves. Right? As I say, you've got this wonderful infrastructure. It's grossly underused. Grossly. Right? So how do you get from a kid age 3 who's already been damaged to somebody who's going to be attending here in 20 years' time or 15 years' time, 15 years? That's the next question, as it were. What do you have to do to make the education system work for those already damaged kids? Right? That gets us a start.
That's very thought-provoking things there. I guess you touched on social mobility. You also touched there on the fact that once kids are left behind, it becomes increasingly difficult. What can we do then as a society, when we talk about our social responsibility, what can we do as a group of people to make sure that once kids start to get left behind, we don't put them in that box and that's them for life. We make sure that actually it's never too late to be what you might have been.
Yeah, well, it's very much easier to do it at the level of a community than it is at the level of a country. There's not much that needs to be done centrally, and there's not much that either can or will be done centrally. Right? It's very hard. Whitehall is so fragmented, one ministry from another, to an extent that unless you've been there and seen it, you couldn't believe it. Right? I worked on what was laughably called Levelling Up program. I was supposed to be the guru for levelling up, right? With by far the most competent minister in Boris's wretched government, which was Michael Gove. Michael Gove was a man of integrity and ability who actually believed in levelling up. And he got no money for it. It was a farce. Right? It was a farce. I challenged him eventually and said, if you threaten to resign, because who was the enemy here? It was Sunak, both when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer and when he was Prime Minister. There was no money for levelling up. Right? So I said, you should threaten him with resignation. Right? Threaten Sunak with resignation. And if you threaten that, unless he gives you money, you don't want to resign publicly. And of course, Gove at that stage put loyalty to party before loyalty to country. And so he didn't do it. And so there was continued no money for levelling up, at which point, instead of him quitting, I quit. Right? But I think the Whitehall level is unfixably difficult. It's not worth trying. The local community level is much easier to change. And this community is quite a strong, I picked up, you've got a strong sense of identity. That's not unique, right? Yorkshire's got a strong sense of identity, right? So I was proud to grow up in Sheffield. Right? In my day, it was a prosperous city, and I'm proud of it. Right? Nowadays, Sheffield's much demoralised, lost a lot of spirit, and it's a shame, it's a tragedy. But here, I sense there's an enormous amount of community spirit. When we talked earlier in the day with a smaller group of people, there's a lot of energy and ideas here. And just coming in before we came in, I mean, there's great experience around this room that can be harnessed for change. What I suggested to the previous group is that you form yourselves into little clusters, 3 or 4 or 5 people who focus on one little problem. How do we improve the chances of young kids getting, at age 18, into a place like this? Right? If we double the facilities here, double the intake here, so we use the facilities twice as much, where would the constraints be and how would we overcome them? These are the things that little teams can focus on and crack. They're really crackable problems. Right? So that's the education stuff. It's a crackable problem. Right? I don't want to embarrass you too, but we talked earlier today, and you're from Southern Ireland. And Southern Ireland, if we go back to the 1950s, was the poorest country in Western Europe. It's now the richest country in Western Europe. Right? That didn't happen just by a magic wand. Right? It happened because Irish people did stuff, and they were very clever about it. So here's what happened in the 1950s. It's a model, an absolute model of how you can use the fact that a lot of clever people have left Scunthorpe. Right? And they have. You've got a big diaspora. Southern Ireland's got an enormous diaspora. Right? 40 million Americans say, oh, I'm Irish. Right? And they realised that was an opportunity. And so the Southern Irish decided what firms would we like to target? What sectors would we like to attract to Ireland? This is the 1950s, 1960s, when they got nothing. Right? Nothing. And so they thought, oh, some jobs of the future, whatever the jobs of the future are, some sectors. And then they'd scroll round and think, which firms in America are in that sector? Okay? Do any of them have an Irishman, an Irish name, as the chief executive or the chief financial officer? Oh yes, this one in St. Louis. Let's write to them. Write to them a letter saying, we're very impressed by your firm, and we'd like you personally as chief executive to come to Ireland and advise us on how we could benefit from your experience and your advice. Would you personally be prepared to come to Ireland to advise us? And, you know, after being at the Mass, and then you go on to have a Guinness in the pub, and then you pull out this letter and say, hey, guess what? This guy from Ireland's written to me saying, you want me to come back and advise him? Do you think I should? And of course he's proud, you know. And they all say, of course you should. Off he goes. Right? That was how they used their diaspora. Can you use your diaspora in the same way? Why not? Have you gone to schools and said, who's famous in this school? You. Why do you think you're here? Famous, right? More of you, more people like you. There's lots. Every school needs to be asked, who's done well from here and left? Huh? That's a doable thing. So that's taken us beyond education to use your diaspora.
I guess the challenge there, though, is how do we not stop these people leaving Scunthorpe, but how do we incentivise people to stay? Because you're quite right, it's easy to say to kids, you know, this person went to this school, but actually they've left and they've gone to live in London. So how do we make sure we're capturing that and keeping people back in the town?
The people who will come back can come back as mentors initially. And everybody who's been successful, I bet including you, sir, points to somebody who mentored them a long time ago. A school teacher who recognized your abilities, somebody somewhere, right? Certainly with me, right? A smart school teacher who believed in me when nobody else did, right? And so mentoring is a massive opportunity that you can use. They can use to pull people back initially, just to help, mentor. They then start to become role models. And as you get some more role models, of course, people will start to stay. I mean, this is a very nice place to live. And so you can start. And I persuaded Sheffield University to start. It was very worried that not enough kids from the south were applying to Sheffield University. I thought that was great myself, but they saw it as a problem. They saw it as a problem. And so I said, well, why don't you advertise on the London Underground? And I suggested to them what they should do. They did a variant on it. My idea was show a picture of a stressed out guy on his daily commute into London. And I'd put peak stress above a picture of him. And then I'd have a picture of somebody swanning around in the Peak District. And I'd put peak stress or Peak District. Right? They didn't do that, but they did something very similar. They did a campaign that you could see on the London Underground said, made in Sheffield. Made in Sheffield. It was very good. It was raising the profile of Sheffield. That's, again, you can do just like Peak Stress or Peak District. I mean, you're lucky. Huh? The one disadvantage that Sheffield has, and I hate to admit it, but we're not on the coast. Right? Being on the coast is a huge advantage. Right? Works Week in Sheffield was a chance to head to Skegness or Bridlington or Filey, you know, or if you were posh enough, Scarborough, you know. So your images, you've got a huge advantage with the coast. What else can you attract to that coast? Your big advantage is cheap land. You've got enormous amounts of cheap land on our coast. This is fantastic opportunity, right? Either turn it into a playground or turn it into a really good coastal production unit, you know? And so that's a fabulous thing that you should be able to offer to people. We've got free land. If you come here as a firm, foreign direct investment called, you bring a firm here, doesn't have to be from abroad, it could be domestically, then that firm can have, you've got to know what to ask for. You ask from Whitehall that we've got to be able to grant planning permission ourselves, not coming from you. Right? We've got to be able to give some free land, and we've got to be able to say, if you come here, then automatically, if we like what you're doing, you've got planning permission to do it. Don't have to wait 3 years through some ghastly process. Right? So you've got to know what to ask for. That's a very important point, because I think you've got about 3 months to ask Whitehall for what you want. You shouldn't ask Whitehall, you should tell them what you want. You say, yeah, we've seen what you've done. You've come to here and you've saved our steelworks. It's a stay of execution. It won't close the next 5 years. But we know our future is beyond steel. And so we're not in a panic, but we are looking to build a future beyond steel. And that is entirely feasible. Don't get dragged into nostalgia for steel.
Yeah, once again, very thought-provoking, thinking about how we can push the town on. And as you say, it's not about now looking to the past, but actually looking forward and how can we reinvent ourselves as a town. At this moment in time, I'd like to open it to the audience for any questions. I think you've heard us now for half an hour, so if there's anybody that's here today has got a question for Paul, then please raise your hand. Yep, Laura.
Ask it again. Is there a town or a city currently in the UK or previously in the UK that's ever had this automatic planning permission? I know domestically, if you build a house and you tick a box to say that it's what's called a passive house, it ticks the boxes for social, economic value, environmental, energy efficiency, you can build without planning permission domestically. But commercially, is there a model out there for that?
There's a model anywhere else in Europe, but not here. Yeah. Here, we've got a system which is brilliant at stopping things. Right? The highest paid London lawyers are now paid £20 million a year. Right? What are they paid? They're paid to stop things. Right? We've got some very talented people doing very damaging things. Right? If you go anywhere else in Europe, this is normal. I live part of the year in France. What I've described is the standard French system. The standard French system. Right? And it's very successful. They get big foreign firms coming in areas where land's cheap, and they're able to offer free land, full planning permission, as long as what we like is, as long as we see what you're doing is going to be good for us, you've got planning permission, whatever you do. You can build houses anywhere in France, automatic planning permission, as long as you're one of 140 designs. Right? These are bloody standard anywhere else in Europe other than here. Learn from the Netherlands, fantastic. Right? Learn from Estonia, learn from the Nordics. So you're asking for a model here. It's an empty box. It always will be an empty box until you push the system. You've got a moment now when you're in the news. You're in the news, right? Keir Starmer came here, right? God, that was Treasury thinking ahead, wasn't it? They thought ahead a whole 3 days and convened Parliament on a Saturday, the first time since a war or something, right? And then Starmer comes up on the Sunday, really thinking ahead, right? This is short-termism gone mad, right? And then they announce, we've saved you. They haven't saved you. They've caught the problem in the first place, right? You now ask them. You've got 3 months before you drop off the news. Right? You say now, this is what we want. We want the power to attract our own companies from abroad or elsewhere in Britain. You pioneer that because you're in a stronger position than anywhere else in the country. You're in the news as a crisis place. Right? Use that moment. Seize the moment. If you don't, if you try in a year, you'll be off the front pages. And if you try in 5 years, it'll be another parliament and it'll be another set of problems. Who's in power then? Who knows? Right? Will they keep you open another 5 years? Who knows? Right? Use this moment. Right? Come together on a simple list of what you want out of government, what you want to use money for. You do not need any more infrastructure like this. Right? It's brilliant infrastructure. It's better than anything I've seen, either around Britain or around Europe. It's world state of the art. But it's empty half the time. Double your intake. You've got people just across the road, aged 18, who are not coming here. That's a tragedy. It's a missed opportunity of the first order. Right? Seize it. Say, this is what we need. There's a huge opportunity also for philanthropy, large-scale philanthropy. You've got, in that network of diaspora, you've got some very rich people who, some of them are very well-meaning and would help. At Lincoln, you've got one of the richest people in Europe who's very kindly disposed towards anybody in left-behind regions, as long as it's a coherent proposition that's not just one-off saving 28 people, it's a strategy by a place. And it can't just be a strategy of a local authority, it's a strategy of a community. This is your opportunity to seize that moment. I realize it's hard to believe that you, for the moment, suddenly have more power than anywhere else in the country. But you do. Right? That's why I'm here. Seize the moment. Right? Yeah.
Well, I'm the chief exec of Oasis that run 2 primary schools in the town. And you know that sort of adage that it takes a village to raise a child, and yet society seems to act like it would be better if a series of professionals did the job. So I guess I've got a question about how do you think we go about the task of doing what you described Whitehall not being able to do, of joining up different disciplines, so that education and housing and healthcare actually is greater than the sum of the parts? And secondly, how do we connect community into that so that it isn't just integration of professional services, but is what you just described, you know, an actual community thing?
So, first of all, in the little meeting we had earlier, people volunteered to do things. There's a lot of public-spirited volunteering in this community, a lot. What do you do in education? You know better than me how much more opportunity there'd be if you joined things up at the local level, obviously. Right? My advice is do it. Right? Do it. And here's the secret that you don't realize. If you do things, then somebody specific has got to stop you. Now, if they stand up and stop you, they're a name identified as having stopped something that the community wants to do. Well, that's rather a risky thing for any civil servant or whatever, or guy to do. It's a bit scary standing up with your name to be identified as the person who stopped something. People don't like to take that sort of risk of being criticized. Right? Now, you don't like to take the risk of being criticised, but if you take that risk, then you've got this group, a strong, cohesive community saying yes, and your local MP saying yes. I don't think anybody's going to take the risk of standing up and stopping you. It's too scary for them. So you turn that fear of standing out to your advantage. Sorry.
I'm getting in trouble just as much as you are. That's a really good answer. Are we moving around? Any more questions? Hope you've got your running trainers on.
Thanks very much. People usually joke that I don't need one of these, but in the spirit of the recording. My name's Max. I'm a local councillor in Scunthorpe, and I was just interested in your point about education earlier, how children, particularly in left behind communities, often start quite early with the really positive primary level experience. But in 1997, London had the worst state schools in the country on a whole range of metrics. 13 years later, they then had the best. So I guess what lessons can we learn actually from what London did locally in Scunthorpe and towns like that? Because I was in Stainforth recently, an old pit village near Doncaster, and they still haven't recovered from 40 years ago when they lost their minds. If anything, they've gone backwards. And I don't want the people in this room to be looking back in 30 years' time and think, oh, bugger.
Yeah. So, your local councillor, and you see the problem, and you wanted to know, what can we do? And I'm going to give you the same answer. You do it, right? You join people up. And there's a lot of people that I've talked to, but there's a lot of people you will find who believe in the same things as you, that as a network community, you can change things, if only you've got permission. You don't know whether you've got permission or not. Assume that you have until you haven't. And that's hard. You need courage. I've worked on an awful lot of places that are poorer than this. Right? And I've had an awful lot of students from very poor places who want to go back. But I tell them the hard truth. If you want to turn around a poor place, there is an irreducible need for courage. Now, I say that, you're listening to a person who hasn't had to show more courage than a mouse in the whole of my life, right? I've been really lucky. Whether I would be able to show courage, I don't know. I've never been put to the test. But if this community fails that test, you will not turn around. Nobody is going to save you. That's really the brute truth. No outsider is going to come and save you. If, however, you take the courage to start saving yourselves, then a lot of outsiders will turn out to be insiders and come and help you. They'll cheer you on and they'll give practical support, right? I'll give you one example we explored earlier in the day, which is one of the things that would be nice. Suppose if kids, when they left secondary school, suppose if kids, when they left secondary school, instead of leaving Scunthorpe, said, oh, suppose 2 or 3 of us got together and did a startup, right? Wouldn't that be fun? Right? Now, what do you need for that? You need a bit of money to run something like Dragon's Den. You don't have to call it Dragon's Den, but something that's exciting for kids and comes out with the top 20 people in Scunthorpe, young people who come up with the bright idea, or the top 20 people, old people who come up with a bright idea, right? You can be at any age and reinvent yourself, right? I'm still writing books when I'm about 102, you know. But you reward that with a prize money. It doesn't have to be vast money, but prize money, right? There are people who'll put that money up. I'm in touch with a philanthropist who made his money in Rotherham. He's really stinking rich, and he feels guilty. And so I just got an email from him yesterday. I was coming up on the train saying, if you think it's a good idea, I'll do this. I'll put up £1 million, which will be, and it'll be £250,000 a year for the next 5 years or so, or 10 years, as long as it's matched, right? And as long as it's for a place that has a plan to change itself. I said, I'm just heading up to Scunthorpe. Scunthorpe would be absolutely perfect for this, right? No, I don't know. There he is. He's offering the money. I'm sure there's loads of stinking rich people. People like you who, you know, you're not stinking rich, but you're diaspora successful who's come back, right? And there's your chance. There's your chance. Do you want an annual Scunthorpe Dragon's Den with the top 20 winners each getting £5,000? Do you think kids leaving school might start to say, hey, instead of going into a gang or getting out of Scunthorpe, do you think we should have a go at this, winning it? Yeah? If you did it the first year, maybe there wouldn't be many entrants. If you did it every year for the next 5 years, you'd be flooded with entrants. It would be a new thing that kids started to talk about. Right? So that's the sort of thing just to get startups going. Scale-ups, which are in many ways more important, harder, but you can do it. This is a doable strategy. Right? Your example was, you know, forging a community around changing the life chances for young people. Startups are part of that, so are scale-ups, because we need decent work that gives people dignity. We've got at the moment a lot of jobs that are the opposite of that. They're at the bottom of a hierarchy of humiliation. We don't need more Amazon warehouses, right? Shit jobs, right? That's a technical economics term, sorry. We don't need more of that, but we don't have to have it, right? I gave the example to some people of Mondragon, which is a cooperative movement in the north of Spain. North of Spain, Basque region of Spain, was a disaster of the first order, far more disastrous than anything you've ever had. It was violent, it was a rotten, stinking basket case of rubbish, right? People were killing each other, murder on a grand scale, right? It's now the richest region in the whole of Spain. Right? It turned itself round. It wasn't good political leadership. Neither Spain nor the Basque region has ever had that. It was a bottom-up movement, right, of this community. Basically, it was a cooperative firm. And that was brilliant. You've got a big, the cooperative movement is here. A big operation. They were saying, I don't know if the cooperative woman is here tonight, but she was here earlier, and she said, you know, it's tragic. I've just taken over as the head of the cooperative firm, and it's a big firm here. It's the biggest single employer, but our links to Scunthorpe are very weak, except at the bottom jobs. And how can we do better than that and pull in kids who've actually got the learning from this marvellous building to actually run management positions in the co-op? Well, you've got the infrastructure, you need the throughput, right? You need to scale this damn thing up. Right? So that's from startups to scale-ups, right?
I think we've got another question from the audience.
Yes, so I want to pick up on a couple of things you've said. Actually, the Oasis CEO mentioned that the school, Henderson Avenue, is one of the schools they look after. I actually went to Henderson Avenue as and I actually been working with Rob, so I'm a professor in medicine in Cambridge from Scunthorpe. So after I got to know Scunthorpe tomorrow, I decided to actually walked into the building here and said, I'm a professor in Cambridge, can I come and do some teaching? And actually, the lecturers here have been actually fantastic, and I've started to teach on the course. And the students are fantastic. I mean, they're very diverse. And I also recently gave a talk at Imperial, but the students here are equally as good. So recently we organised a trip to Cambridge. 20 people went down, staff, students. We took them to the Wellcome Genome Campus, which is where the human genome was done. And then I took them to the Biomedical Centre campus in Cambridge, where all the startups are. And the students from here were absolutely, I was so proud of them, they're so impressive. And they got, equally, the people on the other side who are possibly these elitist organisations need to talk to people like this, they want to, because they recognise that there's this discrepancy in terms of the economic opportunity. And it's really the people here just don't have the doors open for them. But I think I think the point you make about contacts is very, very important in education. I think we need to professionalise that a little bit more. We also have a startup, for example, an organisation in Cambridge called Start Codon, which starts companies up. And it actually teaches you how to start a company up. And they will put money on the table to do it. And so what we're trying to do here now is we're actually trying to bring data into the courses here, because data is the future. But also the lecturers here are excellent. The quality is very, very high. The quality of the student, and I agree with you, we need to get more people into this building. I have a centre in Hong Kong, actually, a stem cell centre. And you're right, that's the competition. They work 24 hours a day there. In the sense, no, I don't mean in the sense that they work, they love it. They enjoy it because they embrace it, because they're learning and they're educated, they're hungry to get on. But I also sense that in the people here in this building, a little bit more energy, a little bit more input, I think it will be catalytic. So I do agree with a lot of what you said. We just got to get a little, I think this organisation, we need to build on it. I think we need to involve Sixth Form College here, tie them into it, but then get in people like yourself, get that connectivity and get that energy going.
Thank you very much. Okay, you've given me a challenge. Anything that Cambridge does, Oxford will match. Here's my Oxford team, and but you've said it all, right? This place is just as clever. You know, you've got a great pool of talent. You've got a great pool of kids, and you just need the confidence to say yes. Right? And building that confidence, that's what you need, and you know, we can both help give it to you. You've got very, very good, very bright kids. Damn it, in Sheffield, you know, the kids in Sheffield, their ancestors, Sheffield, sorry to tell you this, but the Bessemer process of steel was invented in Sheffield, not in Scunthorpe, right? Let's get that straight, right? So we invented that. We invented football, right? We invented snooker, right? They had much to be proud of, right? And we've not had a chance to harness that. Do you play snooker?
No, but I thought I was watching Mike Bassett for a second there. We invented the Bessemer smelting process.
Let me tell you about snooker. Right? I've played snooker since I was 8. Right? I've got a snooker table at home. I've forced my children to learn how to play snooker. The World Snooker Competition is held in Sheffield, in the Crucible Theatre. Maximum capacity about 400. Right? It's been there for 48 years. Right? It would be nice to have the 50th anniversary there, wouldn't it? It won't be there because one of these 20 million a year London lawyers had discovered how to detach the rights to host the snooker competition from Sheffield and has put it up for auction. So do you know where the 50th will be held? It'll be held in Riyadh, right? Saudi Arabia. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? If we'd invested 5 million quid with a stadium worthy of the name to seat 50,000 instead of 400, with a prize money worthy of the name instead of 13 and sixpence or whatever it is, right? We would still have snooker here in Britain, not just here in Britain, but here in Sheffield, right? That would have been a source of pride. Is the government going to do that? Any government? Doubt it, right? This is the bitter realities that we've got to push against and restore pride despite them. You will succeed here in Scunthorpe despite, not because of what London is doing.
Yeah, fantastic that. I think just looking at the time, have we got enough time for just one more question?
Thank you. Worked in Scunthorpe for 20 years as a primary school teacher for most of that, but currently working outside of education, but in an education-based company with literacy, looking at our mission is that nobody should be limited because they can't read. A lot of what you said, I've loved coming here tonight and hearing, and you've really inspired me tonight a bit. It's been great to come, but carrying on from what the gentleman said over there about Oxford, about Cambridge and Oxford, and what I've found working in Scunthorpe is that you need to raise the aspirations, because I remember a few years ago going to some English teacher training with North Links, and they were saying that councils in London, again what you were talking about, who had similar economic status to Scunthorpe, the aspirations for those children were much higher than they were in Scunthorpe, because they just didn't see what goes on. They don't see big universities. They don't see kind of big organisations coming on, and that's what. And I'm glad to hear that's exactly what you've been talking about. And I think what we need to be looking at is raising the aspirations of those children before they get to sixth form, when they're in secondary. And I've seen that in my job now. I've seen that all over the country, where there's links with universities, links with employers, looking at apprenticeships, and that needs to be happening. But also, looking at my role, I look at a lot of students who are lacking in literacy skills, adults who are lacking in literacy skills, and those skills, if they're not addressed by the time they get to 16, 18, then that'll have an impact on them going forward. So not only do we need to keep this going and double the student intake here, but we need to make sure that as many of the children in Scunthorpe can access that education because they've got the right literacy skills.
Completely. We cannot afford to write children off just because they can't read. Right? So partly you need much better programs for literacy, but also not everybody should go to university. And a lot of kids don't want to go to university, and they're quite right. My 19-year-old don't want to go to university. Right? He's excited by getting skills that he thinks are pertinent. He wants to get into cybersecurity and learn that by doing it. A lot of kids learn by doing. And so the idea that if you haven't gone to university, you're a failure is scandalous. That's got to be cut at source. Vocational training, which we're desperately weak in, they need an enormous amount of effort to upskill both the experience of vocational training and in particular the status. Right? We've got A-levels, T-levels. What the hell is a T-level? Why can't we, if everybody's going to get A-levels, just call everything a bloody A-level, right? If everybody's got to have a degree, give them a degree. You can get a degree without going to university if you go through a proper vocational training course and you get a degree in whatever, right? There's a lot of skill in lots and lots of jobs, right? So we must up status vocational training. We'll close with oh my God, yes, we'll close. But we'll close with a story about dyslexia because my oldest son, who's 24, is deeply dyslexic, which means he's 24, he can barely read, right? Doesn't matter. This is what I've taught all my kids and what you should teach all yours, right, in school. Any attribute, including dyslexia, which has come through the white heat of evolutionary selection, has filtered out all the attributes that are dysfunctional for the society. Every attribute, however unusual, is valuable to the society, otherwise it wouldn't be there. Now, the more unusual your characteristic, like dyslexia, the more useful it is, as long as you find the right niche. My 24-year-old found the right niche. Do you know what profession you should be in if you're dyslexic? Architecture. You see the world differently. You see spaces differently. There are top architecture firms which will only hire dyslexics. Right? He's got a double first, a master's first in the top architecture school on earth, and he's hot because he's found his niche. Right? But behind that was parents like us saying, yeah, you can't read, but you'll be able to do something else. Believe in them. Yeah? And so he did grow up with a certain degree of self-belief. The schools kept trying to push him down. They pushed him in the bottom set here, the bottom set there. Right? But that's the reality. All these characteristics, not just dyslexia, ADHD, all these things, all the ADDs and stuff, right? They're valuable in the right niche. And we should be proud of them and teach children to be proud of them. But on that note, I'm told if I don't leave in the next 2 minutes, I turn into a pumpkin.
No, that's great. I think Rob will probably just come up and close for us, but I think if we could just give Sir Paul Collier a massive round of applause. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been an incredibly enlightening experience. I think we've all certainly been influenced and encouraged by tonight, so thank you once again. Rob, if you...
Well, yeah, huge thanks. I was standing between you all and the conversation. I'm now standing between Paul and his taxi and the rest of you and a drink, which is even more dangerous. So I just wanted to say, a couple of quick thank yous on behalf of the Scunthorpe Tomorrow team. To huge thanks to Sir Paul and to Andy for a sort of really rich and energising conversation. And I hope those of us who can stay around will be inspired by it and be able to continue the conversation. Huge thanks to the university campus for hosting us. Cara, I think I saw you sort of scribbling down the quote from Paul about your facilities exceeding Oxford's. I think you got the orders being sent to the sign printers already for those. And then to all of you for coming out on a Friday night. I really hope you've enjoyed it. 2 very quick asks of people, because there is no such thing as a free lecture. The first is you've got a feedback form on the little table in front of you. We're really grateful for feedback because it helps us to make these events even better. So please do take a moment to do that. Second, you've all signed up, so we've got all your emails addresses, I'm afraid. So you will be hearing from us sort of next week about the sort of next event, and we're planning on sort of running before the summer, a bit of a drop-in, because like I say, we hope you've been really inspired by today, and it's given you some ideas about what you and what all of us can do as individuals. So we will be running that sort of drop-in event, and hope to see many of you at that. And then if you've got time to stick around and continue the conversation over a drink, we'd love that too. And I think we're just back in the room behind us. But yeah, again, huge thanks to Paul and Andy, and shall we give them another round of applause?